At the direction of our leadership team here at Madison Methodist Church, I've been going to every Sunday school class and leading a session on the Global Methodist Church, just talking mostly about the structure of the church and then answering questions too about the doctrinal commitments of the GMC or the Global Methodist Church. Now, I will say if you have doctrinal questions, we won't address many of those here. You can go to globalmethodist.org and you can look up the book of Doctrines and Disciplines. That will be ratified at the General Conference in the fall of 2024. But as Bishop Jones has told our leadership team, 95 to 98% of what's there in the book of Doctrines and Disciplines will be ratified in 2024. So pretty much everything you see on paper there, and it's about 100 pages. It's a quick read. That's what we're going to be and who we're going to be as the GMC. One of the things we're doing on Wednesday nights here is we're going through the catechism of the GMC. It's the basic beliefs of what Wesleyans and Methodists and really Christians have always believed. And you might want to look at those videos. They're on our YouTube channel where you found this video, but you can also come on Wednesday nights. We're about halfway through that study at the end of September as we're recording this. So if you have questions, though, about specific doctrinal commitments, I'd ask that you'd email me, Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, at madisonmc.org, or you can call the church office, 856-6058. And we can set up a time to grab coffee, grab lunch, meet at the church office, and we can talk about your specific doctrinal commitments. But again, we read our forefather John Wesley, we believe what's always been believed and has been believed everywhere and at all times. So there aren't many specific Wesleyan distinctives, and we're going to hold on to those classic Orthodox truths of the faith as found in the Article of Religions. And so, but I'd love to talk to you if you have specific questions. But today I just want to introduce you a little bit more to the GMC, about who they are. Formed in May of 2022. So it's a very brand new denomination. And yet, as you look at other denominations that have formed in the last 30 or 40 years, like the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, or other expressions, it's amazing how we already have 3,150 churches, churches in every state in the United States. And as churches are allowed to begin to disaffiliate in Africa and the Philippines and other places, we will be a global church very, very soon. And that's always been a commitment of the GMC, is not to just be a church of the USA or a church of Western Europe, but to be global in its nature, to take on, as Acts 1:8 would say, to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the utter ends of the earth. So we've seen rapid growth, 3,150 churches already, and they're adding churches every week, but also 3,400 clergy. And so there is not a pastor shortage. There are plenty of clergy to serve the churches in the GMC. I just want to share a couple of highlights about the GMC and their structure, because that's where we're going to have a lot of questions. And that's where we'll see just a few differences from the UMC that we stepped out of. There's so many good things in the UMC in terms of structure. We're keeping those. There's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there are some differences. One of those would be it's going to be much more grassroots, much less top down. And that's one of the great commitments of the GMC, is make sure that budgets aren't too top heavy, that it's not the institution that's telling the local church what they're to do for the institution. But one of the great things is this is allowing more money to stay at the local church level. Jesus is the hope of the world. But in a very real sense, it's the local church that's the hope of the world too. It's the local church that know the needs of their community. It's a local church that knows the pain points of their community. And so it's the local church that ought to have as many resources as possible, not to feed up, but to go into their community. And so one of the things I've noticed in my relationship to the GMC as a pastor, but also as a presiding elder, is the way that the GMC can adjust and pivot quickly, because it's not top down, it's bottom up, but also that more resources are being given to the local church. And that's where the rubber meets the road for the kingdom of God. It's when the local church gets excited and invests prayerfully and with their resources in their own backyard, in their community. So I love that part of the GMC. And also its continued emphasis on the laity. It is to be a lay-driven movement. That's where more people come to faith, is through a neighbor, family member, a coworker. That's when people come to faith. As important as the preaching of the gospel is, whatever different resources you read, 5 to 6%, 12 to 17%, those people come to faith under preaching, but most people come to faith because of lay people just sharing their faith with other people. And so I love that commitment of the GMC to continue to be good Methodists and Wesleyans, and to gift and to give ministry to the laity to do. Now, some of the big questions that we've talked about in our Sunday school sessions, I've been to most of our Sunday schools, and we also had a town hall. So if you missed that session, you could go to that. And this video is just kind of to be a summary video of that town hall. Many of the questions come about, well, how do we do appointments? We will have bishops in the GMC. Those bishops cannot be elected until after we have our general conference, and so we don't have as many bishops as we'd like right now. But in terms of appointment making, it is still under the blessing of a bishop. So when our former associate pastor left and went to his new church to become a senior pastor, Bishop Scott Jones approved that appointment. So we still have bishops, but it's a little bit different. It's kind of a hybrid system to what we were under an Episcopal sending system, and maybe what we understand in our Presbyterian and Baptist friends, how they do appointment making or how they get their pastor. The bishop will, knowing our church well, will have a church profile on each church and clergy profiles on every clergy person. When an appointment is needed to be made, the bishop will say, hey, I think these 3 or 4 clergy people fit with you. Would you talk to these men and women? And a church will need to be faithful to do that, to take seriously those recommendations. But if at the end of that, if they're not pleased with that, if it doesn't seem right, as the book of Acts reminds us, as it doesn't seem right to the Holy Spirit and to them that that's to be their pastor, they're free to go and free to look at other GMC pastors, not just in their conference, but around the country and around the world. And then once they come back and have done that interview process, they can come back to their bishop and say, we think it's this person, not those you suggested. And typically, and what we've seen so far is the bishop has always blessed those appointments. So the churches and the clergy will have much more say-so in the appointment process. In our past system in the UMC, often bishops will admit that they gave much larger churches or mega churches this kind of opportunity, and now all churches have that opportunity. The ability to speak with other pastors who might fit their church and be able to take more time to prayerfully talk with them, to learn about them, their gifts and graces, and see if they match their church. There will be annual reviews of clergy and staff at every GMC church, but not necessarily annual appointments. Those will come up as staff parish relations committees realize that they need a pastoral move, or if a pastor senses he needs a pastoral move. So you won't see a July 1 new pastor every year or that kind of appointment process. It'll be a little bit more as needed. But that's how pastors are appointed. The bishop's involved, the bishop finalizes the appointment, but the churches can bring it up. The pastors can bring it up. There's going to be great freedom to prayerfully consider all kinds of people for your next pastoral needs. The general conference that we talked about will not meet until 2024 because not enough of the central conferences of the UMC, the Philippines and the African conferences, they've not been allowed to disaffiliate like the American churches. And so the GMC wants as many people at the table when we finally convene for our general conference. We just don't want it to be a few Eastern European conferences and US conferences. We want as many people at the table as possible. And so when general conference meets, we're going to wait to make sure that those churches in the Philippines and in the Western and Eastern Europe and Africa, that they've had the opportunity to get out and to be at the table. And so when they do meet in 2024, they'll have the book of doctrines and disciplines, doctrines and discipline before them. And you can read that again on globalmethodist.org. And again, Scott Jones thinks most of that will be passed. There may be a few differences there, but that will happen in the fall of 2024. And then jurisdictional conferences can happen. In 1939, Methodists said, hey, we're going to have jurisdictions. There'll be something helpful about that for the election of bishops. That's what typically happens there. but for other reasons, shared ministry. But what happened in that jurisdictional setting in 1939 and kept on in 1968 in the United Methodist Church is that's where accountability happened. And that's going to be very different in the GMC. The accountability of the churches is global. It's not just a little group in a little corner, a little pocket telling you who you are to be, but the whole church will have a say-so now, so that if somebody were to get off on their theology in the Western Conference or the Southeastern Conference, the whole church can bring correction. And so it's going to be church-wide, global accountability. But there will be election of bishops from jurisdictions. Not that a bishop from another area could not come, but we will begin to elect bishops, and we're just having to wait until there are more. And that jurisdictional conference to elect more bishops will happen after the general conference, just as we used to do in the UMC. Now, what that's left us with is a little bit of a different structure, but most of it's the same structure as we had in the UMC. But to help with appointment making, since there's very few United Methodist bishops who transferred to the GMC, we are having to do one thing a little bit different. The cabinet in the Mississippi West Tennessee Annual Conference, right now we're a provisional annual conference, will become a full annual conference in January of 2024. We'll ordain clergy there. We'll celebrate our life together as a full annual conference. But in the meantime, and until we can elect more bishops, we do have a president pro temp, a part-time position, a clergy person serving at Senatobia Methodist Church right now, who helps us with appointment making. And he has a cabinet as well to help him with the appointment making in the different districts in our annual conference. The Bishop Scott Jones has been very good to whatever we ask of him for appointments. He agrees with. He asks us some questions, presses us on some things, but he's been very favorable to all the appointments we're making. So in this season, as we wait for more bishops to be elected, there are clergy persons in every provisional annual conference that's taking the role of president pro temp, as well as a cabinet. Now, that cabinet is made up not of district superintendents. In the UMC, this is one change. In the UMC, we had full-time district superintendents who had about anywhere from 90 to 110 churches in their district, about that many or a few less clergy in their district. We're going back to what Wesley had. John Wesley had presiding elders. And so we're hoping that those presiding elders can remain full-time in their churches. Most pastors want a pastor and they want to be in local churches, but they will have 8 to 15, maybe 20 as a cap, churches and clergy under them. I'm serving as a presiding elder, and I right now have about 13 churches and about 10 to 11 clergy that I watch over. If I get more than that, we're going to split the Pine Belt District where I serve. We'll split that in half, and we'll get another presiding elder to come alongside and to do that work in another geographical area. So like the UMC of old, we do have a cabinet. Instead of a bishop, we have a president pro temp. We have a presiding elders who make up that cabinet and help with the appointment work. We also have hired part-time, and nobody's receiving a salary yet. That'll start in January. People are doing this just to help the church get started. But we will hire in January somebody to give part-time attention to church planning. We're excited that the GMC is very committed to planning churches, to be able to take the gospel into areas that needs to have a church family, a Wesleyan expression, an Orthodox Wesleyan expression in those areas. And we've already seen, just in this year alone, 2 to 3 church plants, and we see that more will be coming. And that's exciting to be a part of that. So we do have somebody that's beginning in January, will be very part-time, but will give direction to church planning. Just like our old annual conference in the UMC, we will have, and I serve on that. Another person in our church as a layperson serves on the Board of Ordained Ministry to approve clergy who come to be a part of the GMC. We'll have a finance and administration committee, a leadership nominations committee, administrative review. So again, less overhead, no buildings. We're actually renting space at Senatobia for the conference office. So it is grassroots, it is bottom up. But obviously, if you're Wesleyan, you believe in accountability, you believe in being very careful. And so we do have committees to do these shared work and needed work together. A lot of people are going to ask questions about our giving. Under the apportionment system in the UMC, We had a pretty high apportionment dollar. I'm glad to report that under the Connectional Giving plan of the GMC, our giving is probably only 50% or 60% of what we used to give to the UMC. So more money will be able to stay local in that. Now, I'm very pleased to see that some of that apportionment giving in the UMC was very missional. And so our church has said, if we are seeing profession of faith numbers, if we're seeing programs we can support as we did in UMC, there's no reason not to share ministry together. So our finance committee is on board with that. Our outreach committee, our missions council is on board with that, and they're planning to, we'll finalize budget in a few weeks, but there are plans right now to continue to give money to Camp Wesley Pines and Camp Lake Stevens, because they are bringing children and adults to Christ in their summer camp programs, in their Curcio programs, Emmaus programs. And so we want to be supportive of that. If the Methodist Children's Home is doing wonderful work with children or to help victims of sexual trafficking, our church wants to come along and be a part of that healing work. And we're going to take what we were apportioned in the UMC, and even though we're a GMC church, we're going to give to where we see God working. Same thing with campus ministries. Our plan is to support Ole Miss, Mississippi State, USM, those large colleges where we're seeing some of our students go, but we're also seeing profession of faith numbers. We're seeing people recommit their lives to Jesus Christ to grow in their discipleship. Our church is going to sponsor and support those ministries. We believe we can have a shared ministry with our friends in the UMC, and especially where we see kingdom work happening. A little bit different, and that's the hope. A little bit different than the apportionment giving. It isn't based on what you spend on yourself, but in the connectional giving in the GMC, it's what you take in, but there are caps. Right now, the first 6 months, we spend 1% going to the international office and another 1% to the annual conference. The cap on that, the proposal is 1.5% to the international office and a cap of 5% to the annual conference office. I don't think we'll ever get that high. I think what you'll see in January when the first 6 months is up, it's probably a cap of about 3.5%. So again, we'll be at about 50%, 60% of what we were apportioned in the UMC. Again, a commitment to the local church and to grassroots. In terms of our local church, we have had some questions about, are certain committees done away with? Everything we've done in the past, there's no reason to throw out what has worked well. Our plan is to stay what we said, not just doctrinally, but as a church, we might have to change to stay the same. We're staying the same in our leadership. Every committee that we've had, we have right now. There are required committees, as in the past, to have a nominations committee, a staff parish, trustees, finance, and administrative, or some kind of leadership council. We've not turned over any of that. We're going to have exactly the same structure. Some people go to simple governance where it's one committee. We've chosen, in a large church like us, we think we can still be nimble and pivot like we need to in many committees. Plus, it gives an opportunity for more people to serve and to have a voice in who we are as a church family. So we're seeing the exact same committees as in the past. Nothing has changed there. We'll also have a charge conference in the fall where we'll have to say to our president pro temp, eventually to our bishop, hey, here's what we've done. Here's who we are and what we've done in the last year. And we'll have a charge conference this coming fall. It will be with all of the churches because we want to celebrate together our new denomination and get to know the churches that are in the Pine Belt District in the future, our presiding elder. And if it is still me, we'll have another presiding elder probably come in and lead that. But we'll do it individually and give each church individual attention as they need it. But many things will stay the same because those were good things. It's good to have an annual review. It's good to have that many committees, especially a church doing as much as we are. One thing that will change will be clergy. Clergy will have, we're actually going to go back to old school Methodism. And it's going to be, instead of just elders elders will first be deacons and then become elders. So we will have elders and deacons, and we will have, just like we did in the Methodist Church, we'll have lay supply. Local licensed pastors, which one of our pastors is, he will be able to move up into elders much more quickly in the GMC, but still have to have all the educational requirements and go through that process. But just again, there will be clergy who will be elders, those who are deacons, And then you will see some lay supply. And we have some of those in our church who are already right now going out and blessing churches as lay people. And you're going to see all of that. Again, clergy are appointed, but our clergy have a little bit more freedom about where they go, as do churches. And I've already shared with you a little bit about our shared ministry and our hopes for that. Just again, if there are other questions you have about the GMC, please email me or call me if I can talk to you about that. I'm encouraged that every week of this fall, we're seeing churches come to be a part of the GMC. We're at about 110 churches in the Mississippi West Tennessee Conference with 110 clergy. So we're right on point. We have plenty of clergy for those churches. And we anticipate growing weekly. And then in the United Methodist Church, in the Mississippi Annual Conference, they plan to have another disaffiliation vote December 9th. And we're going to see more churches who will step out of the Mississippi Annual Conference. There's about 100 to 150, we think, that are in process. So that can mean anywhere from 60 to 70 to 80 to 100 could vote to disaffiliate. And we think the majority of those churches, just as last time when 189 churches disaffiliated, the majority of those churches will become GMC. Hopefully that gives you some of the background of the GMC, its structure. Again, the doctrinal commitments will remain the same. Bishops will be elected. We will have, instead of district superintendents, we will have presiding elders. General conference won't meet till 24, and then jurisdictional conferences will meet. But if you have any other questions about who we are, what we believe about baptism and communion, it's still the same. But what we believe about doctrinal commitments, again, you might want to check out our catechism study on YouTube or come live on Wednesday nights. But please call me. Our leadership team, our pastoral staff, we're excited about who we are. Even though it's been a difficult season of transition, you all have weathered that well. You've kept your eyes on mission and ministry. And we believe this new structure with the GMC is going to help us even more. It's going to help us to reach out to more, to have more resources to spend on missions and on students and kids and reaching our community. But again, if you have more questions about what we believe or who we are structurally, please reach out to me, barry@madisonmc.org, or call the church 601-856-6058. And I look forward to talking with you about that. Thank you.